I'm sure you've never done any of these things, but we'll talk about them anyway. Horoscopes, fortune cookies, testing the fates, flipping a coin. It's amazing to me that with all of our modern technology at our disposal, those archaic devices are still the way that some people govern their decisions and the way that they guide their lives. What am I going to do this week? I don't know. I got to go to a Chinese restaurant and find out. Which way should I go? What decision should I make? Oh, I don't know. Let me just take this piece of metal and flip it upside down and see what happens. As far as I can research, every expedition up the 7 great summits have had the same thing in common, and it wasn't a fortune cookie. It wasn't the flip of a coin. Even the great Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first to go to the top of the earth on Everest, knew the importance of one common characteristic of cresting the summits. And it's simply this: a guide. A guide. In that area of the world, they're known as Sherpas. Someone who knows the trail, who understands the trail, and who has already triumphed to the top. For years, the Sherpa people of Nepal have been leading expeditions to the crest of Everest. Their acclimation to the atmosphere, their aptitude for the geography, and their physical ability make them the natural choice of guidance up the summit. No one even gives it a thought to begin a summit climb without a guide. No one does. Even the most educated climber of the Western world knows, I will not make it. No matter how much I know, no matter how well I'm equipped, I will not make it without a Sherpa, without a guide. Today, I want to look at the most overlooked of all of the summits in our lives. This is the one thing that we simply let slide as we climb in order to reach the heights of God's destiny. For those that are locked into a physical summit, this idea of a guide is a no-brainer. If I were to put you out on the middle of one of the highest mountains of the world, it would be a no-brainer for you to say, I need a guide. But for many believers who actually decide to leave the lower elevations of Christianity and climb to greater heights, it's not a no-brainer, it's no bueno. We never take guidance with us. Proverbs 1:5 says, listen, or let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. What is guidance? Well, in a society of personal GPS and pride-filled, godless expressions, how much do we truly seek the guidance of God? How much do we truly seek the guidance of God? Are we intentional in where we place our lives and who or what is giving the direction of our life? Elizabeth Elliot is the widowed wife of Jim Elliot, who was a pastor or was a missionary to the Auca Indians in Ecuador. Jim gave his life without any kind of second thought. His wife says this: Christians are not to come to God looking for advice. Oh, I've prayed that prayer. Hey, God, just tell me what you think. I'm not going to listen. I just want to know. Christians are not to come to God looking for advice. We come to God to lead us into His presence, His purpose, and His plan, understanding that there is no other option. Do we come to God simply wanting His advice? Do we come to God simply wanting Him to tell us something that we can say, well, I really don't like that? Or are we letting God lead us into his very presence, into his very purpose, and realizing there is no other option for me? There is no other option for me. I wonder how many times we come to God looking for comfort when we should be coming to God looking for guidance. So this morning I want to do a brief exposition of a very familiar passage to illustrate that point, because we tend to use the 23rd Psalm as a comfort passage. The 23rd Psalm is one of those passages that we recite to ourselves a lot of times when we need comfort, when things are overwhelming. But in reality, the comfort that we gain only comes from the decisions that we make, and that first decision is a direct decision of who will I follow and who will guide my life. Listen to it. Let's go. 23rd Psalm, verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. That is David making a direct statement. The Lord is my shepherd. It's not, oh, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. David is making a decision on who is going to guide his life. David is not just assuming that God is going to comfort his life. He is deciding who is going to lead him. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me, watch this, he guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Again, the psalm starts with a decision, not just a statement. David is making an intentional choice on who he is going to follow. See, there are many guides that are available to you today. You can follow the latest fad. You can follow culture. You can follow your heart, which, by the way, the Bible says is most deceitful above all things. I can follow the money. I can follow the loudest voice. Or like David, we can follow the only one who meets every need. Isn't that what he said? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. The Lord is my shepherd. Why? Because God is going to take care of everything I need. So we can make the decision to follow the only one who meets every need of our life, who knows the best paths to be on. Listen to the path that David is on. Green pastures. Quiet waters, restful, restoring places. That's the path that God has got David on. That sounds like a pretty good path to me. I've been on some paths that were not so great. I've been on some paths that were not green pastures, that had no water, and were not very restful. David is saying, I am choosing God as my guide. Why? Because the paths that he put me on are the best ones. And most importantly, he has the best motive. The best motive. What do you mean by that? Well, what are the paths of righteousness that we need to be led through? He says he leads me in paths of righteousness, and then he tells us why. For his name's sake. The paths of righteousness will never put us in a place where the Spirit of the Lord is not present. You need to hear that again. If I say God is my guide, if I make that decision and I am intentional in following that, then the paths of righteousness that he leads me in, I need to understand that God is never going to put me in a place where his Spirit is not present. Oh, that's good stuff. You ever go through life and think, man, I'm in this all by myself. I'm in this alone. Why? Where is everybody? God, where are you? In the paths of righteousness, God will never put us in a place where his Spirit isn't there. Why does the Lord desire us to be on the right path? Why? Well, he tells us it's for his name's sake. It's for his name's sake. For his name's sake simply means it's his reputation. It's the reputation of God. I'm going to give you just a bunch of scriptures. Jot these down. Take these home. Look them up. Genesis 1:26, John 3:16, Isaiah 48:9, 1 John 2:12, Jeremiah 14:7, 1 Samuel 12:22, and Mark 10:29. These verses are verses that God stakes his reputation on. Let me show you why. All of these scriptures are the things that God connects to his namesake, to his reputation. These are the things that God will stake his reputation on. So David says, he leads me in paths of righteousness. Why? Because his reputation is on the line. Well, what is he willing to put his reputation on the line for? The paths of righteousness are for his name's sake and his reputation. Let me tell you what that means. For his name's sake, we are made in his image. For his name's sake, his love provided a solution for our separation. For his name's sake, he held back his punishment. For his name's sake, he gives me a reason to worship. For his name's sake, he forgave my sins. For his name's sake, he intercedes on my behalf. For his name's sake, it pleased him to make me his people. For his name's sake, the gospel message is available. For his name's sake, he sees me as holy. For his name's sake, he made me acceptable in his sight. God put his reputation on those things. That's why he leads us in the right path. But if we're not letting him guide us in these paths, then we're not protecting his reputation. And we're not pronouncing his glory. Is your life for his namesake or for your namesake? Whose reputation are we more concerned about? Mine or his? One author said, some might be saying God does not need protection. God doesn't need me to protect his reputation. And you'd be right. He does not, since he alone is all-powerful. But how people view him in the light of our behavior may put him in a position of not appearing to be worthy enough to be identified as holy. God doesn't need me to protect him. God doesn't need me to protect his reputation. But if my behavior doesn't match up to what I say it should, then I am putting him in a position where he may not be recognized as holy. And therefore, worth giving up poor habits to follow Christ into eternity. Let's go on. Psalm 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Now, I want you to note something. I'm gonna do something I normally don't do. I'm gonna go back to the King James Version here for about 30 seconds. So write it out with me. We're going to go back to the King James Version of the Bible, and it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yea, Y-E-A, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And I know that the accurate translation of that little word, yea, is even though. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But I think some of us need to change the emphasis in order to understand the importance of God's guidance. Instead of, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it needs to be, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Why? Well, there's an interesting geographical detail right here. The lowest place on the entire planet is in an area that would actually be within the boundaries of the biblical promised land. Now, again, we tend to think about the promised land and we think about, oh, this land flowing with milk and honey and it was just perfect and there was all this vegetation, and we read the story about the spies and the grapes and we're just thinking, man, what a place. The lowest point of geographical space is in the middle of the promised land. It's a valley near the Dead Sea that is 1,300 feet below sea level. It was actually in the location or close to the location of the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was extremely hot. It's extremely dry. It's extremely isolated. It's extremely barren. It's this same topography that Ezekiel describes in his vision of the dry bones in Ezekiel 37. And it's possible that this is the imagery that David is drawing from in writing this particular psalm. David is seeing the lowest point. He's seeing the driest place. He's seeing the place where the heat or the pressure is suffocating. And isn't it possible to say, yay, though I walk through that, I will fear no evil. See, I don't know, Ken. Well, here's how that happens. Because you can't disconnect verse 4 from verse 1. Remember what verse 1 says? The Lord is my shepherd. Not, oh, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. So, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will. You cannot disconnect verse 4 from verse 1. The reason that we live in the valley of the shadow of death is because we quit following the guide through the valley of the shadow of death. That's what the psalm says. Yea, though I walk through the valley. But some of us feel like we live in the valley. You know why we feel like we live in the valley of the shadow of death? Because we quit following the guide through the valley of the shadow of death. And it is in his guidance, even at the lowest points, even at the pressure points of the journey. And and guess what? You're going to have those. I'm sorry. You're going to have those low points. You're going to have those pressure points. A summit climb is not a summer trip to Disney World. It is in his guidance that we find his presence. He says, no, there's no fear because you are with me. It is in his guidance that we find his protection. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. It is in his guidance that we find preparation. You prepare a table before me. You know what that means? That God prepares a banquet in your honor. You are the guest of honor. You are seated right in the middle of the table, and everybody else is there for you, especially your enemies. God prepares a banquet in your honor, and he anoints you to do everything you need to do. In his guidance, you find his provision. It says my cup does what? Overflows. It's just not filled up. It's filled to overflowing. It's filled beyond measure. It goes beyond and beyond and beyond and beyond. People ask me, Ken, are you sure you really wanted to do this Giving Hope thing? Are you sure this is really the best thing? Are you sure this is something that we need to be involved in? Let me tell you how this works. We spent $567, $8, I don't know what it was, somewhere in that neighborhood. We got 10,000 pounds of food and supplies, put them in a room. We brought people through yesterday. I took a little bit of just a list of the basics that everybody got. If you were a family that came through, as a family, you got certain things. Boom, 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 and it would have been the same. I took that basic list and I put it together, and I went to Walmart last night, and I walked through Walmart, and I jotted down what the retail prices should be, and I added it up. Every person that came through, every family that came through, the retail price of what they would have got, I feel like I'm on Price is Right, and the retail price, the retail price was right at $30. $30. Now you may be sitting here going, man, I wish somebody gave me $30 worth of groceries. Okay, hold on a minute. Why don't you thank God that you don't have to be in that position first? Second sermon, that one's done. Take 30 times 38. It's about $1,100. It's about $1,100. We spent about $550. We gave out $1,100. Guess what? We still have enough food to do this 3 or 4 times. See, when God says, give and it will be given unto you, pressed down, shaken together, running over, 10 times, 60 times, 30 times, 100 times. We just saw that happen. We gave $550. God gave $1,100. He doubled it instantly, and we still have tons left over. Why? Following the guidance of God. My cup does what? It's running over. You don't have to believe that, I guess. That's fine. Let's go on. Psalm 23:6 goes on. It says, surely goodness and mercy or love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Again, don't disconnect the conclusion from the thesis. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my ultimate, obvious guide. That is David's thesis decision of life. Surely, there's a guarantee right here. The guarantee of guidance. Surely, goodness and love will be in my life forever. What was the thesis? The Lord is my guide. And because he is my guide, I am guaranteed the love of God, the mercy of God, the goodness of God is going to be in my life forever. And then David brings that to an application. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David just changed his address. David just changed his address. He is moving himself into the presence of God. Oh, this is getting really good. John 15 says, if you remain in me, again, King James, if you abide in me, if you will change your address. See, some of us just want to live where we want to live. Some of us want to live in the misery that we're in. It's comfortable to us. It is time to change your address and move yourself into the presence of God. How do I do that? He becomes your guide. You then become guaranteed the goodness and the love and the mercy of God, and you make a decision to plant your life, to plant your family, to plant your situation in the presence of God. If you abide in me, I will abide in you, was what he said. So why aren't we more available? Why aren't we more attentive to the guidance of God? In the early Exodus narrative, Exodus chapter 3 and 4, it's a story between Moses and God where God is calling Moses not to only follow, but to actually be a leader of people. And Moses has 4 oppositional questions to God's guidance. And they're the same 4 questions that can stand in your way this morning of allowing God to completely guide your life. I'm not going to read all of these verses, but they're in Exodus chapter 3 and 4. And let me just give you what the questions are. They can pop them up on the screen as we go. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? We don't follow God because we question the acuity of God. What is his name? We don't follow God because we question the authority of God. Well, the Lord did not appear. We don't follow God because we question the action of God. And what if I'm not equipped? We don't follow God because we question the ability of God. Those are the reasons why we will not totally follow his guidance. Step after step after step. If you're a climber on a great summit, you better make sure that where that Sherpa plants his boot into the snow, your foot goes right in that hole. You know why? Because he knows that within an inch, there could be a crack in the ice. He knows that within an inch, there could be a precipice. He knows that within an inch, you could be in danger. But he knows where to set his foot. But if I question his ability, if I question his authority, if I question his acuity, if I question any of that, and I say, no thank you, I'll make my own path, I will be in trouble. John 16:13, but when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, when he, the Spirit of truth, comes. See, there is a holy Sherpa in your life. The Holy Spirit. And Jesus said that when he comes, he will, watch this, he will make you feel good? Nope. He'll give you this spiritual experience? Nope. You'll get these religious Christian goosebumps? Nope. When the Spirit comes, he will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on his own. He will speak only what he hears, and he will tell you what is yet to come. So what is the natural progression when we strike out on our own? See, God has said, I'm giving you a guide. I'm giving you someone, and he knows all truth. Every situation of your life, every question that you have, God has the answer for. Every one of them. There's two of us that believe that. Thank you. Every question, every situation, every decision that you're going to make, God has the answer for. God knows exactly what the truth is. He knows exactly where to set your foot. He knows exactly what decision you need to make. And he has sent the Spirit of God to guide you. But guess what? God is not going to pull you up the mountain to his greatness. God is not going to put you in some Disneyland cart and ride you up to the summit of Everest. You're going to have to be led. So what happens? What's the natural progression when we strike out on our own and we don't allow the Spirit of God to guide us all the way to the truth? Again, I don't have time this morning to go through all of this passage, but read through Romans 1. Read through Romans 1, and keep in mind, Paul is talking to believers. He's not necessarily just dealing with sinful people in Romans 1. See, we take passages sometimes, especially the really hard ones, and we're like, oh, thank the Lord that's not about me. We look at Romans 1, and we see the worst of the worst of the world. Read it a little closer. He's talking about you and me. He's not talking about mass murderers. He's not talking about school shooters. He starts with you and me. And what does he say? He says the wrath of God. And again, this is not hellfire and brimstone and the apocalyptic demise. He says the wrath of God is going to be revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth. What's the natural? What's the flow? When we're not following God, when we're not letting the Spirit of God lead us, first thing that's going to happen is we're going to suppress the truth. We're going to suppress the truth. We're only going to take certain parts of it. We're only going to believe certain parts of it. We're going to find what we like. We see this as a menu, not a manual. Well, I want that. I want that, but can you hold them, can you hold the faith out of that, Oh, and I'd like an order of this, but can you hold the guidance, please? I just don't want that. Can you maybe put that on the side? We see this as a menu, not the manual. That's suppressing the truth. He goes on to say that they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. Then we begin to just say, well, that's really not what God said. I like this better. And then finally, we create our own truth. We create our own truth. That's what happens when we don't allow God to guide us. I wish I had time to unpack that. Guidance requires faith. Guidance requires faith. I get it. Guidance requires faith. Guidance is not, if I like what I see, I'll take it. That's not guidance. God, give me something that I like so I can follow you. Guidance is not, if I like what I see, I'll take it. Guidance requires trust. Not, I will agree to trust and then he will give me fill in the blank. Okay, God, I'm going to trust you, but here's the deal. Here's the bargain we're going to make. I'm going to trust you and you're going to give me. That's not guidance. Guidance says, I trust him and I let him give or withhold. I let him give or withhold whatever he chooses. That's guidance. Say, come on, Ken. I believe in Jesus. I believe. Isn't that enough? You tell me, why didn't Jesus pull 12 guys that he personally chose and said, come believe me? That's not what he said. He said, come follow me. Come follow me. There are two types of believing that happens. One of them is a sense of recognizing and agreeing with the truth. I recognize the truth. Yeah, I agree with the truth. I agree with that. Someone one day told me that the sky was blue. I didn't know what blue was. I really didn't. I didn't know what blue was. I didn't know the difference between blue and green and red. I was too little. And my grandmother, my parents, somebody told me, hey, look, there's a blue sky out there. Oh, okay. And guess what? All of my life, I have believed that the sky is blue. It's going to be just like God. We're going to get to heaven, and he's going to go, that was really green. I'm waiting for that to happen. But I've believed the truth that the sky is blue. I believed. The other is learning how to bring your life in line with the truth that you say you accept. Because see, I could have said, that's not blue. It's not blue. It's not blue. I'm not going to believe it's blue. I'm going to call it green, and that's just going to be it. It's going to be green, and that's the way I'm going to live my life. It's green. The sky is green today. And I believe that. See, there's a difference in the two kinds of believing. And it's the same thing. We can say we believe what God says. We can say we believe what God is. But do we truly believe until we bring our life in line with his truth? That takes guidance. So here's my question today. Is God worth following? Really? Do we believe that? Because if we did, we would do it. We would do it. If he's worth following, if it's for his name's sake, if it's his reputation that's on the line and not mine, the decisions that I make are going to be different. The choices that I make are going to change. If he's worth following, letting him guide me on that path that is best for me, letting him guide me to a place where surely goodness and mercy and love are there all the time. In praying for guidance, Elizabeth Elliot said this as well. In praying for guidance, I find that I usually have some solution in mind which looks attractive to me. I want God to guide me, but I'm hoping it will be my way. What my prayer amounts to is, God, will you approve my plan? I know this, and God knows it, and there's no pretending that it isn't so. See, I think sometimes we come to God, and when we're embittered or when we're imbalanced, and we need God to do something to help us make sense, then we say, God, will you guide me? There's a difference between being guided by God and asking God for directions. Psalm 73 says, when my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. Yet I am always with you, and you hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterwards you will take me into glory. I want you to note something in that verse. That G on glory is not capitalized. It's not talking about heaven. It's talking about the here and now. It's talking about a place of honor. It's talking about a place of reward. But then he comes to this incredible realization that, God, who do I have in heaven but you? Earth has nothing that I desire beside you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. God, there is no other guide. There is no other option. Psalm 139 says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there, in all those places that I try to go on my own, God, you're there. Watch this. And your hand will guide me. Let me finish this with this Elizabeth Elliot quote one more time as you stand. Christians are not to come to God looking for advice. We come to God to lead us into his presence, to lead us into his purpose, to lead us into his plan. And there is no other option. Today, you stand on the precipice, on the edge of a decision. The question rings out again. Come follow me. Will you follow me? Come follow me. Come follow me. We move into that place. Will you take these next few moments and will you change your address? I get it. There's a world out there that you live in. We all do. But it doesn't need to be our permanent residence. Through the guidance of God, through the guidance of God. The Lord is my shepherd. Make that your statement today.